Audit Committee, Tuesday the 9th of March. Hope you're all keeping well and safe. So please start the meeting with apologies for absence, please.
Councillor Terry Hennigan.
No further comment?
No.
No. If we could have any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interest, please. Any declarations of interest? No? Thank you. We move on to agenda item 3, which are the minutes of the meeting of the 9th of February. We can take them page by page for accuracy, and any comments, please stop me. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7. Are we all content that that's a true record? I've got a hands up from Peter Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just point out, I didn't come to that meeting and was unable to send apologies. The reason being, I had my COVID vaccination late that morning and spent the afternoon in bed. So if it could be noted, please, that I wasn't trying to miss the meeting, but I was too unwell to take part. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Jones, and hope you're feeling better now after that COVID vaccine. If there are no other comments, I'd be happy to take those minutes as a true reflection of that meeting, please. Can I have a couple of hands up for support? Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Jack Jones, Paxton, Peter. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. If we can move on to agenda item 4, and this is the follow-up to the Disclosure and Barring Service audit report that was undertaken, which was a critical report. And I believe we've got Sean Williams and Emma Johnson to present this paper.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just ask you to assume that everyone has read the paper, and if you can highlight any areas of particular interest or concern for the committee members, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everybody. So following the last audit, we had a total of 12 recommendations made. Very pleased to say that 10 of these have already been implemented, and the 2 that are remaining are pending implementation. One of the pending implementations, 2.2.2, which relates to the policy. The policy is now complete and is with HR. The procedure has been finalised and we are piloting that quietly. Once we're happy with it, we will then issue communications to all employees, managers and schools. Our staff net pages will be updated and all the changes will be reflected there. The final recommendation then, 2.4.2, which related to the exception report. Unfortunately, this was postponed when the Oracle Fusion project was paused due to the pandemic. We have, however, now restarted Oracle Fusion project with a scheduled go-live date of October, and this will be included as part of the solution. I would like to thank Emma, the Help Desk Manager and DBS Manager, for progressing all these recommendations and implementing them over the last few months, as we know, which have been very challenging. We've also worked on a number of additional improvements and changes on top of the recommendations. As part of the pandemic, we needed to make a change to the ID verification process. They were previously undertaken at the contact centre. However, due to the pandemic, we brought this back into the help desk. It appears to be working very well and it's speeding up the process. And to date, over 1,000 verifications have taken place. It is our intention to keep this process within the service centre going forward. We will also be attending social services safeguarding meetings and we're awaiting an invite from the social services chairperson. We believe if we attend these on a regular basis, we'll be able to work in a more collaborative approach and again, enable some speedier resolutions to any queries that may be raised. In addition to all the reports that are currently produced and issued, there are now 2 additional reports One is sent to the HR business partners and the other then is sent to the school's challenge advisors. This enables them to deal directly with either the business area or the school concerned to again improve the process or speed up the process or tackle queries as and when they do arise. So just to reiterate, the DBS function is fully automated and the onus is on the employee and the manager to ensure that when they receive those automated notifications, that they action these in a timely manner. This is then followed up by email reminders and then the reports and the chase-ups that the help desk undertake. We are the administrators of the process, and we believe at this moment we are doing everything we possibly can do with these new changes and the recommendations in place to further improve the process. I hope that gives a bit of an overview for everybody. So Emma and I are happy to take any questions. I've got a problem, I can't hear anybody.
No, neither can I.
Sorry, he's muted us.
Hang on,
That's fine.
someone had muted us, so
Oh, sorry.
sorry, I'll repeat what I said. It looks like you've done a lot of work to strengthen the systems and processes there, and I'm grateful for all the efforts because I know the council is looking for zero tolerance on the DBS, and you know, with all that additional layers of control, it looks as if you're working towards that with what you're doing. But I will open it up to comments. I have a comment. I have a hand up from Julie Davis.
Hi, Sean. Can I see the paragraph 4.1? You say that following the DBS audit, revised procedures were implemented, such as the risk assessment register, to strengthen compliance processes, which has seen an improvement in returns of 57%. What about the remaining 43%?
That would be ongoing work, and it is work in progress, Julie. So I don't know if I caught it all, Julie. Sorry, it was very echoey, and I'm not sure if I caught it all. Was it around the risk assessment and just the first point?
Yeah, the returns. You said there's been an improvement of 57%.
Yes.
I'm wondering what about the remaining 43%?
I think Emma and I can go back and provide further figures if that would be helpful.
What I'm trying to gauge is whether there is a risk to the council of that remaining 43%.
Emma, would you agree that we do not believe there is a risk and it's an improvement in the returns of 57%, not saying that there's 43% of returns not being returned?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
With regards to the 57%, that was a figure in time when the report was written. So the figures may have changed now, but with regards to the risk assessment register, before it was implemented, we weren't doing any checks at all. So in my eyes, that's an improvement on what we are doing. So we have had 57% of the risk assessments returned. So that doesn't mean to say that those 57% are working without a DBS check. It just means that we've had the risk assessments returned.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leslie Wharton.
Right, as much as anything, just to say I'm pleased to see all the progress that's been made. But a totally practical point, I don't know about the rest of you, the sound quality this afternoon is pretty awful. It's ever so echoey. I could hear Emma perfectly just then, but not Julie, and Sean was very, very difficult to hear.
Oh, there's an echo from someone's speakers, I can just see.
The echo is coming from the chair's speakers, I think.
Ask everyone to mute their microphones to see if that makes a difference. Ben, can you mute your microphone? Right, there's only Jeremy's microphone open now. Is that any better?
that sounds better at the moment, but it depends. I think we'll have to wait and see when other people do.
Okay.
I think, Chair, that when your microphone is on, we're speaking. That's where the echo's coming from. So it's
So
obviously not
it's-
not echoing when you're speaking, but when we're speaking.
Okay, perhaps Jeremy can turn the mic off when others are speaking. Oh, we'll give that a try. Thank you, Leslie, for highlighting that. Are there any other questions regarding this paper, please? Simon Crockins.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hope you can hear me properly. If not, can you just raise your hand? Just wanted to highlight really that we've added this to the plan for next year, which we discuss later. So we'll be revisiting DBS in full in 21-22. Obviously, the comments and the updates we've had have come from department. They're not been retested by us as yet. So I'll be feeding back those results in due course in the new year.
Questions is whether you're going to revisit it to check that these systems and processes are having the impact that they seem would have. Unless there are any other questions, we've been asked to remind you of the responsibilities of the DBS process, and that should be reinforced through directors and heads of service, and to continue to report to CMT on a quarterly basis as a further update on the position across the authority. We've also now heard that Simon intends to follow up that process. So are we content to accept those recommendations, plus the additional confirmation from Simon that he will be revisiting this to test that we're headed quite quickly towards that zero compliance? Can I have, do you want to vote formally?
Yeah, can do. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Cyril Anderson.
4.
Councillor Peter Black.
4.
Julie Davis.
4.
Councillor David Halliwell.
4.
Councillor Paxton Hood Williams.
4.
Councillor Peter Jones.
4.
Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, 4.
Councillor Erica Kirshner. It's not here. Councillor Mike Lewis.
4.
Chair.
4.
Councillor Stan Pritchard.
4.
Councillor Andrew Stevens. Not here. Councillor Leslie Walton.
4.
And Councillor Mike White.
4.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. If we can move on then to agenda item 5, and I believe Simon's going to take the interim audit plan agenda item 6 together with, because they are interfacing reports. Can I just mention at the outset that I've had a conversation with Simon regarding an early draft plan, and Simon's assured me that he's undertaken a risk assessed process in preparing that plan. He's not been able to fully use the assurance framework and the risk register because they're still in the process of being developed and enhanced. So the plan we've got in front of us is Simon's cumulative audit knowledge and assessment and evaluation of the risks within the council based on the work that he's done in this year and preceding years. I would also like to highlight to the audit committee, we do not have the overall objectives of each individual audit. So it's difficult for us to see at this moment in time if the individual audits are going to cover all those high areas of risk. And we only see the objectives when the report is issued within our progress reports. That's not out of kilter to what other local authorities do, but it's just me to highlight that the report is here for us to approve, but it's been approved with a caveat. We haven't got the total picture of what the detail of the work is going to be undertaken, and therefore we do not know at this time how much assurance we're going to get from those individual pieces of work until their work is complete. I just wanted to set that scene, and I'm sure Simon will add to that, and it'll open up questions after. So can I invite you to take those two papers together, please, Simon?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all of the points you've just raised. Just to make committee aware, agenda item 5 and 6 are very much interlinked, so I'll hold any questions until after agenda item 6, if that's okay. Agenda item 5 outlines the different areas that we consider when putting the plan together. The standards require me to put a risk-based plan together on an annual basis. So it also requires me to discuss the plan with senior management. So the draft plan as presented today was presented to CMT on the 5th of March. So it's presented to you today for comment and consideration prior to final approval in the April meeting. So this plan will be coming back to members for final approval. Again, there is a caveat in the plan in terms of the impact of COVID ongoing. I mean, hopefully that won't be as noticeable this year as it is this year. Sorry, next year as it is this year. But again, that is something we have to take on board as an unknown at this point in time. So in compiling the plan, I do, as the chair has said, look at the risk registers. I look at the assurance map. We look at the materiality of the different areas under review. Again, cumulative knowledge of myself and the team in the department. We also undertake a consultation exercise with heads of service. And that was done in November, December time. So that in that process, we speak to all heads of service and ask them to review the list of audits on the plan on the universe to date, and also to raise any other issues or considerations for the plan. So that was completed in November, December, and all of the points were taken on board. The plan itself is of the same structure as previously, so it's set into 3 sort of layers. The top one being council governance and control, the second being fundamental audits, which members are aware of, and then the service specific audit. So if you go back to the appendices, I've got an extract from the public sector standards outlining the planning process, a diagram illustrating the overall internal audit planning process. Appendix 3 gives an indication of how the plan is linked to the governance framework and the annual opinion, and how that then feeds into the annual governance statement. And then Appendix 4 is the assurance map. Now, as the chair has highlighted, the assurance map has been reviewed and updated based on the new risk register. But as the chair highlighted in the last meeting, there were some concerns over the control measures that were put in place or as recorded on the register. That's not to say there aren't controls in place. It's maybe capturing them in the correct way on the map. So I have reviewed it, and as the chair said, I have considered it, but there is a limitation to the amount of reliance I can place on that piece of information. So that is the background in terms of how we compile the plan. Then the next agenda item, which is agenda item 6, is the plan in more detail, basically. So this sets out the jobs that have been put on the plan for 21-22. Just to give members an update, we have got the same resources this year in the team as in previous years, as in 2.3 in agenda item 6. The appendices to the report show a summary of the plan and a list of the individual audits listed on the plan in detail in Appendix 2. So yeah, the resources are the same. I've had to balance the plan based on the risk assessments of the individual audits. As you know, all the audits have got a risk score, which are reviewed every time they're audited. And again, we've taken on board a number of other areas in the cross-cutting reviews, such as the assurance framework, and other key areas that have been highlighted in previous years or by heads of service and CMT. So that's basically the plan, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Simon. Can I have any questions from members, please? Julie Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Simon. I'm sure we all appreciate the hard work that you've done putting a plan together, because it's not easy to cover all risks when you've got limited resources, and with the thought of possibly another lockdown coming. There are 2 points that I want to cover. The first one is in terms of council governance and control. You've got 2 reviews, Achieving Better Together Recovery and Achieving Better Together Transformation. I think we all understand the importance that this is going to have for the council going forward in terms of the council finances. And I'm wondering whether it's going to be a bit of a challenge for you to give sufficient assurance to the audit committee when, for example, the Achieving Better Together recovery audit is 10 days. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I realise that if you increase the number of audit days here, you'll have to shave it off somewhere else. But you know, I just want to get your thoughts on what a 10-day review could cover in terms of assurance.
Thanks, Julie. I mean, at this point, we're going to have to sit down with the likes of Adam and CMT to scope out that review. I mean, it's very much a work in progress at the moment, and we haven't really sat down with Adam to determine what we need to look at as part of the recovery process. I agree, you know, the 10 days is possibly quite challenging. Just to make members aware, we do build in some contingency in the plan. So there's 30 or 40 days contingency where we can use to bump up some of the budgets if that's required. So yeah, I completely take on board, Julie, that, you know, that could be a tight budget in terms of the depth and the breadth of the scope of the review. But there is also then a fallback, really, and where we've got a contingency budget to increase the time in that area if that's needed.
Okay, thank you. And my second question was in relation to the risk management review, which is placed in comms and marketing, which, from your explanation, puts it as a service level review, not as a corporate review. And I was wondering if you could tell me what assurance the audit committee will have on the risk management process across the council.
Yes, thanks, Julie. Historically, the risk manager has reported to Lee Wenham, the communications manager. So in the terms of the structure of the plan, that is why that audit is placed within comms and marketing. Historically, we've looked at risk on a directorate basis on a 3-yearly rolling programme. So this year we looked at the resources directorate and looked at the risk controls within that directorate. In discussions with the chair this year, we are going to extend the scope of that review and look more closely at the control measures and the risk register across the piece. So that has had an increase in budget this year. And again, I see this cut in across more risk areas rather than just one directorate in this review.
That's great, thanks, because it links into one of the later agenda items in terms of counter fraud, which highlights the point that the risk register as it stands is possibly incomplete. So that's good to know that it's going to be cross-cutting. Thanks for your explanations.
No problem.
Thank you, Julie. I'd just like to reinforce what Simon says, really. The days in the plan are an indicative number of days. And, you know, as a professional auditor background myself, I fully appreciate that the number of days and the scope can't be fully completed until that one-to-one discussion takes place with the management team and the officers. So, you know, I fully understand, you know, exactly what Simon said, and I totally, absolutely agree with the comments that have been made. I have a hand up from Ben Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Feeding on from that and what Julie has said, I agree entirely. I'm pleased that there is something in for beginning to review Achieving Better Together, but equally you're aware from this committee and other committees that it's still work in progress and forming. So it is early days. I would also indicate that Audit Wales will be looking at it as well as part of forming their view independently of internal audits over the adequacy or otherwise of the arrangements we have for responding to and recovering in line with all 21 other authorities. Audit Wales are going to do that across all authorities. And I think you can very much expect the number of days to expand in future years, because this is very much a medium to long term plan. It's not just for the forthcoming year, but given it's new, it was right that a marker was put down. And once we've worked out in discussion with Adam what it is we're looking at, we'll decide ultimately what the right number of days are. The starting position is a relatively small number for the storming stage. I think it will grow over time because absolutely, as other members have said, it will be a fundamental plank of assuring that the savings that are required set out in the medium-term financial plan and the investment priorities are ultimately delivered. It's about as much about the non-money as it is about the money on those things, and it has to be consistent with the advice I've given and the assurance that I've sought as a Section 151 officer in certifying the budgets are adequate.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. Councillor Mike Lewis. Councillor Mike Lewis.
Yes. Yeah, I am on. Sorry, I was just unmuted. On page 54, accounts receivable, I should say. Is this high risk a direct consequence of the COVID pandemic, or is it a normal indicator as we hope that we always have a problem getting money in?
Sorry, Mike, you did tend to break up a bit there. I think I got the gist of your
Yes. It's accounts receivable, page 54. What I was saying is this indicator of a high risk on that one? Is this a direct consequence of the COVID pandemic, or is it that we always have a problem getting money in from people, and is there any way we can speed up the process of receiving our debts, basically? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I think the score that we have there is our internal audit risk assessment score, which is based on a number of elements, which includes materiality. So because of the values involved here in terms of recovery, that automatically makes it slightly higher risk, obviously because of the amount of debt that is outstanding. So that's the primary reason for that being high risk. And on top of that, as members are aware, we have seen some issues in terms of poor performance in that area in the past. So that cumulative knowledge in terms of the risk assessment of that particular review results in it being a high risk. That's nothing to do with COVID necessarily. It's an internal assessment of the risks in terms of the value to the authority, possible weaknesses we've identified in the past that haven't been addressed. So that's the combined sort of consideration to get to that point of a high risk score.
Thank you, Simon.
Is that okay, Mike?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Simon. Yeah, it still doesn't answer my question, really. I understand where you're coming from, and we look at this is an overview of the whole situation. But my concern is that because of the COVID pandemic, we're not addressing long-term debt, even short-term debt, as strongly as we should be. I just want some reassurance that that is being done. Thank you.
Can I come in there, please, if I may? At the last meeting, we received a detailed report from officers regarding the debt collection position, and we do have another one in a few months' time. And it's obviously part of Simon's plan. So Simon is aware of where the risks are in respect of his current risk assessment. So I think it's a case of we'll see what that follow-up report will say from the officers, and that will be reiterated, the findings from Simon's audit work. So I think for the purpose of the plan, Councillor Lewis, I think we need to be satisfied that AR is included in the plan with a sufficient number of days that should enable us to have that level of assurance from that work and from the work the officers are already doing to improve the systems. Simon, do you want to come back in there?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to make members aware, obviously because this has had a moderate rating over a number of years, it is a review that we complete on an annual basis. So we are actually undertaking this accounts receivable review again for 2021 as we speak. So it's due to be finalised imminently. So the committee will have the feedback on that review very, very soon. Again, this is just next year's version of that audit to again check that things are being progressed.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you.
Is that okay? Mike, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for reassuring me that we will be getting some feedback next month. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions to make. Do you have another question, Julie? Do you?
No, sorry, Chair. I just wanted to come in to say that I have noticed that there's another review on debt recovery. So I don't know whether that would give added comfort in respect to this query.
Thank you, Julie. And the debt recovery has already been agreed that Simon will do an end-to-end which will include all the areas that are involved in that process. So I think we'll have sufficient assurance in that particular area for the 21-22 plan. I just want to refer back to my opening comments, really. We've got the plan here for noting the methodology and to review and discuss the plan. I think we've been reassured by Simon it's been produced in accordance with the internal auditing standards. It's been risk assessed with the caveat that the assurance framework and the risk register has been looked at, but maybe not totally adding the value that Simon could have gained from that. We discussed about the number of days and whether that resource is enough. So if I could just make a plea for Simon that when you're considering the scopes, that you do give sufficient depth as well as the breadth, because this is a very, very challenging plan for a small team to complete without COVID interferences. So if you can ensure that where the high risks are around mainly those cross-cutting reviews, that we've got sufficient depth in the program, in the plan, even if it's to the detriment of reducing the breadth of some of those areas that are less at risk.
If I could
I
come
didn't
back
want to add any more to that.
So if I could come back on that, Chair, in terms of the prioritisation of the reviews, the plan very much is set out in 3 levels. So the priority number 1 would be level 1, cross-cutting. So if there's more depth needed in those at the sacrifice of some of the service level 3 audits, then that is something that we would consider in the year. Obviously the priorities are level 1 and 2. And then if that is at the expense of some of the smaller ones in level 3, then so be it, essentially.
That's reassuring. Thank you, Simon. I appreciate that. So I don't think we need to vote on this one. I think it's just to note and discuss. And obviously the plan will be taken to the full council for final approval in due course. Mike, have you got a question? I can see your hand still up.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't take it down.
Okay, no problem. Okay then, thank you Simon for all that work, and thanks to the team as well for, I know it's a very difficult time for you to be working in, and our gratitude is extended to you and all the team. If we can move on to value for money and benchmarking. Adam?
Thank you, Chair. This is for information report that I present to you today. I'll just pick out some of the key points and then open up for questions at the end, because I'll take it that the report has been sort of read and digested. So sections 1 and 2 give the background and definition, so sets out the overview on how the council seeks to achieve value for money, and identifies how benchmarking supports performance improvement and helping achieve the value for money. And some of that benchmarking is done on sort of a corporate level, certainly when we're looking at performance management, or through to smaller projects when we're looking for general improvement, or as a comparison to see which is a direction of travel or where we'd go. There's then through the remainder of those sections 3, 4, 5 give more of a background again in terms of what value for money means, the more detailed definition, good practice, and that takes us on to section 6 at page 64, which sets out the arrangements the council has in place to deliver value for money. So as you can see from that list, I won't go through the list, you'll see them all there. There is an array of different areas that we utilise in order to make sure we do that, and one of those is also the annual governance statement, which describes in more detail and gives us that reassurance come the end of the year. When we look at then at section 7 with the external audit by Audit Wales, and this sets out the conclusion that Audit Wales identified that although the council has future significant challenges, the council had put in place proper arrangements to secure value for money from the resources it uses. And that Audit Wales' recent work with the council had provided them with increased assurance in terms of what we do. Moving on to section 8, this sets out how the audit committee can seek assurance in line with the SIP for 2018 Audit Committee practical guidance for local authorities and police. So this is a key document that again will be very useful. I'm sure most of Audit Committee, if not everyone, will be familiar with it in terms of what good governance would look like, and again how you can get that assurance. There's a table just under 8.4 that sets out where our opportunities are to strengthen, and that's where we will continue to improve and develop what we do in order to make value for money as best value as we can. Thank you, Chair. I'll happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for this report, Adam. This is a report, if you recall, that we've been asking for as a committee for some time, because it's the review of value for money and benchmarking is contained within the terms of reference purpose of the committee, and we've not had sight of it for some time. So I'm grateful for Adam for producing this. I've got Councillor Leslie Walton's hand up.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. I'll start with, it might be me being, I don't know, not understanding. 3.5, it talks about benchmarking clubs. What are they? And the other point I would like to make is the definition value for money. There are 3 E's and then it mentions a fourth. Personally, I would have thought the fourth one, equity, is just as important and would relate across the board, just like the other 3 do. And I'm also always very aware that when we're talking about value for money, we've got to make sure we don't just assume that the cheapest is value for money, because sometimes the cheapest might be good value in the very short term, but certainly isn't in the long term. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, benchmarking clubs are a group of similar organisations that come together in order to be able to be a club where we can share information and benchmark against one another. So they're formulated in order to be very similar to our own organisation, to make sure that we are able to compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges, if you like, rather than apples and oranges. So that's the purpose, and there are an array of benchmarking clubs that as outlined that we're in membership of. In terms of the definition, absolutely, equality is very important, just like the other 3. Obviously, with the local government and elections bill coming in, that will put more onus on certainly on performance and making sure that we record all that, and also with the equality duty and the socio-economic duty that comes into force on the 31st of this month, that makes equality even more important, that we can not only pay attention to it, but can audit and show what we've actually done in order to do that. So the definition at the time of writing is as set out, but the reason we've included equity in there and sustainability is to make sure that all 4 are on that equal footing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think you sort of answered my question. We're actually talking about value for money, and we're actually, shall we say, looking inwards at the authority. But what about our customers, the public and so on? What is the definition from, or do we actually measure that they are actually getting quality value for money from us? Is there some sort of countermeasure? We spoke earlier with regards to resource, and I think Leslie actually mentioned, the cheapest is not always the best. So is there some sort of measurement to see that the public are actually getting quality from us as well, quality for money from us?
Yeah, I mean, we do that, Jeff, I suppose, through the focus groups and consultation that we go through in terms of the number of complaints we get coming back, but also, our duty is to provide to our residents and communities. So we already look at it from that point of view in terms of what we spend, how we spend it, whether that be resource in terms of human resource or financial resource. We're looking for that best value in order to give the best offer to the customer that we can possibly give, or to the resident. So everything that we look at isn't just internal in terms of what's value money for us. It's actually value money in order to give to the resident, to make sure that actually they're getting as much return as possible for any service that we put out, or any use of our resources.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Julie Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 8.4, there's a table there showing actions and what's in place and opportunities to strengthen. I'm wondering whether the opportunities to strengthen have been allocated to officers with target delivery dates put against them, so that we can monitor how we are delivering.
Thank you, Chair. This hasn't gone into a formal action plan in that way, but most of them are already identified. So happy to bring that back in due course, or circulate something to the committee showing how they're each identified. But things like enhancing monitoring and tracking, in achieving the budget, that's in place. So we already record that through CMT, through the new recovery board, picked up, and through the steering group. So they're already in place where they're identified. Further training to scrutiny and audit committee members to enable them to better understand and challenge financial and budget reports. There is a training program already in, and that will come through in due course. And achieving better together recovery and transformation program, that monitoring is already in place. So it's not necessarily to an officer at that level, because it's already embedded within the programs that are identified in the final column. But happy to flesh that out a bit more if that would be helpful, if that answer is not sufficient.
No,
Can I come in there? Can I come in there? Because Simon's got a programme of work which value for money would be built into that programme in the areas that Simon's going to cover as maybe one of the test objectives. So would I be right in assuming that, Simon?
Yes, thanks, Chair. The majority of our audits do tend to touch on value for money testing, so yeah, it's included as a part of the standard review.
So I wouldn't want necessarily to bring another report back to demonstrate progress against this, because I think we have to let it embed itself within the systems and seek assurance from the audit programme, the scrutiny panels, and the groups at work. So I think this is just for the purposes of yourself, Julie, coming in new. This is an information paper to give the audit committee an insight into how the council's addressing value for money.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah. So if I can move on to Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Question really for Adam, in the sense that we've obviously gone through a lot of commissioning reviews of late in the council over the last 3 or 4 years. How often do we go back and look at those and evaluate them to see if they're delivering what we expected, not just in the terms of the services that we're looking for, but also that they have provided the value for money that we were expecting?
Again, through you, Chair, if I may. So the commission reviews that were undertaken were predominantly under Sustainable Swansea, and that was done as a final report or a final assessment of the Sustainable Swansea programme, and identified exactly what were the successes, what were the areas that could have improved, and then that was built into the new Achieving Better Together, so that we've taken the good from what was there and then brought it forward into this. So it has been closed out. Sustainable Swansea was a success. Achieving certainly the finance of over £70 million, lots of improvement in terms of performance within services and commissioning programs. So yeah, what was a success and has been reviewed. That's now parked, and it's now time to move on into Achieving Better Together to see where the future holds.
So yeah, I think what I was asking is what lessons we've learned from that exercise of commission reviews to make sure that we do continue to get best value for money. I think there's a question I was asking, Adam.
Got you. Okay. Certainly in terms of a number of the lessons are a realistic time frame in which to work to, making sure that we have smart targets associated with the reviews. Where the reviews worked really well is where there was a clearly defined program, where there was actually a time frame set against it, clear officers marked through, and we knew what needed to be achieved, and then the monitoring that went along with that, and that's what we've carried over into achieving better together. So a lot of good practice has been embedded into the authority through the various systems that we have in place, and also the boards and the systems for monitoring and keeping up to date. So that they're the sort of the key lessons learned. There will be a final report of Sustainable Swansea and what was achieved and so on. Once that's done, that should answer that in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just a sort of a query, really. When we obviously deal with the customers, do the council actually send out a questionnaire to them, Adam, in regards to how we provide the service and value for money? So then we've got some sort of area that we can monitor, and also look at the feedback.
Again, through you, Chair. We do a variety of questionnaires across the year. We do statutory consultation that we'd have with particular projects or initiatives that we're putting in. We do surveys through the year also in terms of identification of what feedback we get. We do have a number of groups that we liaise with, again, to make sure that we get that feedback through, utilising councillors and the feedback that comes from councillors in terms of any consultation that's undertaken or any projects in your ward. And again, we collect that feedback and then assess against it. One of the things that we need to do moving forward, as I talked about earlier in the socio-economic duty, is how do we consult and engage more readily with our community? And what we will be looking for is a new engagement programme where we will be looking at things like the potential setting up of a youth council, or looking at what else we can provide in terms of engagement and consultation to make sure that we can capitalise more fully on the opinion and information that we can get from our residents.
But as such, we don't send out questionnaires, do we?
I'm not aware of specific ones. We may well send out questionnaires in relation to a particular topic or a subject area. For example, I know within community safety on a service level, when there was a satisfaction up towards the Fatty area, and again questionnaires went out there to ask residents about what's their experience, what's good, what's bad, and those sort of things. So lots of services will work with the community in terms of gathering information. We don't, that I'm aware of, do a sort of a corporate questionnaire. Otherwise there is a danger of getting questionnaire fatigue, and you kind of want to hone it into specifics of where you want to respond. So the only main consultation that we do every year is with the budget, and that's where we would look at, again, where our customers, our residents, would be wanting us to perhaps focus on a particular area and what their views are and feedback in relation to the suggestions being put forward in terms of setting a budget.
Okay, thanks, Adam.
Thank you. No other questions there. Can I just ask one question, Adam? Audit Wales undertook some local government studies around improving value for money, and there were a number of topics there. One was the effectiveness of local planning, front door to special care. How has the council been responding to the recommendations made within those reports to try to improve the value for money across the piece?
I wouldn't be able to talk for the whole of the council, to be honest with you, in that I'd have to take that away and come back to you on how each department's actually picked that up. What normally happens is any consultation or any report that comes through would be fed into CMT. CMT would then collectively feed that into any service planning, be that at a local level or corporate, and then do an action plan on the back of that in terms of each service area. So I wouldn't be able to talk for each confidently of each of the services that would have to respond to that.
That's fine. I was just questioning the process adopted for responding to external audit recommendations. It's something that the committee's discussed previously, and the CMT were going to see how they could track the external audit recommendations within the far-ranging reports that they produce, in the same way as Simon tracks the internal audit recommendations. So it is an outstanding piece of work. So that's still remaining on the audit action tracker report. So if I could leave that perhaps with you. And Jason Garcia, could I invite you in to ask the question if the Audit Wales are going to do a follow-up review to those reports?
Thank you, Chair. The national reports we undertake, ultimately some of those recommendations, are relevant to the council. Others not directly so. Some might be related to Welsh Government, and we have an ongoing, work programme in relation to, part of our follow-up programmes. But we wouldn't be following up every single one, every single year. It would depend on the individual risks associated with specific ones. But what I would expect is, as you just alluded to, that the council receives these reports, assesses the recommendations that are included in them, and then decides which are particularly relevant to them, that they have a direct, responsibility to perhaps respond to, and then provides, some actions to the committee along the lines you were saying, to give assurance, that where these recommendations do directly impact the council, that they are being sort of taken on board and acted upon. If something is so significant, and I'll be going through, our audit summary in a little while, then we would potentially pick it up as our ongoing performance audit work programme, but not necessarily every single one. Like this year, we will be doing a piece of work on financial sustainability, and we will very much be following on from the work we did 12 months ago. So that's how we generally work in that regard.
Thank you, Jason. Adam, do you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you. It was just to say, certainly in terms of the Audit Wales reports, all of those do go to scrutiny taken by the responsible officer in relation to that report, and with an action plan in there. So it was just, again, with your previous comments in terms of how are things tracked, I thought that'd be helpful just to signpost that they are tracked and then recorded through the scrutiny process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I appreciate that comment, but I've not seen anywhere that I can find to give me assurance that all the audit recommendations are being tracked through that disparate arrangement, unlike the internal audit reports where there's a robust system in place. So it's something on the action tracker that's still being considered. And I think it's important because some of the Audit Wales recommendations are worthy of some consideration, even if the council decides not to accept some of them. But I think it's worthy, and it's part of the audit process as well, and included in our terms of reference. So we'll keep that on the action tracker until we see something done as a result of it. Okay, thank you very much for your engagement in that paper. I thought it was very helpful, very informative, and it's one of the actions that we've finally got to the table. So I appreciate that, Adam, and I understand, the pressures on everyone, and that paper was very helpful. Okay, if we can move on to the next item, which is the counter fraud paper. This is for information again, and it's something that I think the committee asked for with regard to how the council were progressing against the raising our gain report, and what action was needed as a result of the recommendations again within that external audit review. So if I can hand over to you, Adam, is it, or Jeff?
I'll start off. Jeff is with us, and again, I'm more than happy, Jeff or Simon, to chip in as they see fit and relatively. I think I won't talk too much to the report. It's pretty straightforward and laid out in terms of what's there. The action plan sets out the areas that can help strengthen the already strong position, and I think that's the key message from this, because although within the action plan it could potentially look like Swansea isn't in a strong position, actually we are. we already do have a counter fraud team. Not every authority has one, and our counter fraud team are excellent in terms of what they deliver, the proactive approach that they have, how they coordinate and promote fraud across the council to make sure that that awareness is there. So we know that, and again from the report, it sets out just how severe the fraud is currently. Somewhere between 100 million and 1 billion across all areas. And what we have seen more recently with the recent lockdowns, the move onto cyber more than before, is that level of cyber fraud and the level of fraud. So obviously not only working within ourselves, within the counter fraud team, but also across other parts of the council, like trading standards, to raise awareness in other areas. So this is a whole council approach. But I'm pleased to say that the counter fraud team lead by example in terms of what they deliver. They're a small team, but do a massive amount of work, and obviously keep us in a very strong position in regard to counter fraud. The one thing I would like to just mention, and it came up earlier, just in terms of one of the outcomes of this was the introduction of a risk around fraud being put onto the corporate risk register. That's currently doing the rounds at the moment. It's due to go to CMT a week on Friday. Hopefully it'll be agreed at that point and then be put on. So it has to follow a process to make it into the corporate and then onto the corporate risk. And that, as I say, is just doing the rounds at the moment in order to be progressed. Other than that, Chair, happy for Jeff or Simon to say anything else. If not, open for questions.
Simon?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Adam. Just to echo some of the things that Adam has said. Obviously, just to give some background, there was a fairly detailed questionnaire response to the second round of questions, which is in Appendix 2 of the report. So that gives a lot of detail in terms of what is in place in Swansea, which is very strong. There are ways to improve, and that is really what this report is picking up on in terms of strengthening that control going forward, as opposed to us not having a particular policy in place necessarily. We might have the process in place, but it might not be documented in an official paper document. So I think that is some of the things we have to work on going forward in terms of strengthening the fraud function. But as Adam has said, we have got a very reliable, hard-working fraud team, which are doing very, very good work for the council. And I have to thank them for their hard work. As the committee know, they do put a plan together, which is ideally proactive, but the amount of reactive work that the team have got and have done over the last number of years has overtaken that proactive step. But again, there are definite controls in place, and we are in a strong position in Swansea compared to other local authorities in terms of our standing and the team that we've got and their experience. So just wanted to highlight that really and give thanks to the team. I know Jeff is on the call as well. I think he might want to say a few words. But other than that, Chair, just to reiterate what Adam has said.
Thank you, Simon. Jeff, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for this opportunity to support what's come before you this afternoon. If only I'm going to as the third person, reiterate the message that's come across, and to hopefully give members the assurance that we've been very honest in our answers to these questions, but the questions are asked in a particular way. And are therefore quite exposing if taken on their own. But what I would assure members is, as both Simon and Adam have alluded to, these processes are in place, they are rigorous. Where they are identified as having shortcomings is that these are not fully documented. So some of these processes are not fully documented, but they do exist across all of the areas that are questioned. It does, unfortunately, Chair, come back to the matter that you have raised over the last 2 years. I know that Ben, again, will give you those assurances. It does come back to capacity. Obviously, we'll bring our annual report back to you later in the year. But just to give you some indication of pressures this year, principally for the last 6 months, we've been directly supporting COVID grant payments. not directly involved in the administration, but back-end fraud work on that. And there's been some significant savings around that, which we'll report later in the year. Alongside that, having diverted our resources elsewhere, we've actually had an over 100% increase in the volume of fraud reported to us this year. So it really has been a difficult position. So yes, we do aspire to take some of these key areas of work forward. Just one of the other ones on there again that could be perceived as particularly concerning is training. Again, it's in the detail of the question. It's about annual training. So just to assure members that fraud training is provided, it does exist within the induction package for new starters, but it was actually around that training should be annual. And that's something they're going to work with Adrian Chard and his team to go forward. And that's all I had to say, Chair. But again, as Simon said, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jeff. That's reassuring, those comments from all three. Are there any questions, please? Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Jeff, you mentioned the 100% increase in the with the fraud. Are you able to give us any breakdown as to what areas these are within services that you obviously check?
Yeah, certainly, Councillor White. We're yet to evaluate the full picture for the year, but it would appear there's been an increase in referrals in the council sector around non-residents and subletting. We've tried to analyse that as to whether there's a particular issue that we hadn't counted before, and we believe that it may well be pandemic related, in that people are sitting at home and taking more notice of what's going on in their localities. So there has been an increase in referrals in that area. I am pleased to report, conversely, in terms of early analysis of the data, is that the amount of internal fraud has diminished greatly this year. Again, something that was a concern to members of this committee before. So those are some early headlines, Councillor White, but certainly a full analysis later in the year will be reported to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any other questions? Councillor Sir Anderson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Jeff, I know going back last year, I think the fraud squad were cut down to 2, is it? Are they still at 2? And being COVID, I should imagine your department is under extreme pressures with all that's being reported in the news, i.e. Not just council fraud, but business fraud, because I know Ben and his team has been very, very busy and very helpful throughout this pandemic. But I'm just wondering, are you quite happy with just the two of you going on, you know?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Yes, I can confirm that our team still consists of 2 permanent members. And I think it's fair to say that as part of this action plan, and I'm sure Ben, I can see Ben's hand will come in and say similar positive comments that he said before, is that capacity is constantly under review. And I think this action plan may highlight some capacity issues. And again, I know that's something that certainly is on Ben's radar on CMT, but that's the capacity as it stands at the moment, Councillor.
Thank you, Ed. Cheers.
Thank you. Ben?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Jeff absolutely anticipates what I'm going to say in terms of coming in. I am also going to widen it out a little bit for consideration. Council has just deliberated its budget overall, and a lot of the focus last week was on trying to reduce council tax down from the recommendation from Cabinet. So there was no consideration of spending more money on other things in the forthcoming year. That's a policy choice for members. I think everything that the officers have already said in terms of we are well placed compared to most other local authorities in terms of having a dedicated fraud team still holds. It is a matter that I do keep under review, and certainly in respect of Councillor Anderson's comments, yes, it is true that volumes have gone up for the fraud team to look at because of the nature of the way that work has pivoted away from internal to those shall we say, opportunistic opportunities, which is not unique to Swansea. It's across the whole of the UK and across the world in terms of COVID activity. It's what fraudsters tend to like to do. They like to focus on something and work with the flavour of the day. But it would be remiss of me not to equally point out that applies to the whole of the council and all of its officers. Yes, undoubtedly, business grants has been a large area of having to step up. But my revenues and benefits function have had to do that with not an additional member of staff either. So whilst the committee can express its concerns, and rightly so, it has been necessary to stretch resources very, very thin. And I am hugely grateful to the officers concerned, Jeff and his colleague, and Simon's work in terms of having to put in substantial amounts of additional work, as of a number of officers, to try and cover off what are undoubtedly increased risk opportunities for the fraud-minded community, shall we say. And I'm especially grateful for having some very, very active officers, both locally and plugged in nationally, to be able to give me that assurance. I would always love to spend more. I'm sure members would love to spend more on this, as they would on 101 other things, but council made its decision last week. So I thought it was appropriate I contextualise it, but I'm more than happy to hand back to Jeff and others to comment further. But I am equally especially grateful for the undoubted efforts that the fraud team have provided and given me personal assurance as a Section 151 officer.
Can I just come back in on that, Chair, please? Ben and Jeff, there's no aspersions cast. I know how extremely hard your teams have been working, mate, and you will have always my full support. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, would you like to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for those kind words, Councillor Anderson. Just to give a little bit further context, as I say, I'm conscious, Chair, that you'll have a comprehensive report for us late in the summer, early autumn, with all of these details. But yeah, just a little bit of further context around that 100% figure that I've just put out, just to assure members that not all of those are what we call true fraud referrals. They're a reflection of us capturing all of the elements of the work that come into us. So that's important, really, because we can then demonstrate to members where our work and where our time has been spent throughout the year. So just a bit of clarity, sorry, on my part. It's not a 100% increase in referrals. I think if I was to put a figure on that, possibly still around a 70% increase in referrals, but the other 30% would probably come under the category of other work. That's the explanation I give, and as I said, further detail available later in the year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jeff Jones, your hand's still up. Got a question?
Yes, yeah, I mirror. Yeah, Jeff, you can have some kind words from me and Ben, really, with the team. You know, I think everybody really appreciates, you know, what you've done and so on. You know, with this increase, and Ben actually mentioned grants and so on. I suppose COVID has actually identified an opportunity, I think, for, as Ben said, fraudsters and so on. So how much effect with regards to, you know, grants we've given out and so on? I know it's a national problem that they've embezzled, I think, millions or billions of pounds and so on. So have we identified a problem in Swansea with the grants that people have claimed and shouldn't have?
Can I come in first, Chair, on that one? I'd want to follow up what Jeff had already said. These are referrals. These aren't necessarily instances of fraud. I think it shows how proactive we are about keeping our eyes open for potential abuses. I'm not aware of anything specifically that makes Swansea unique compared to anywhere else. It's just the nature of the world that, unfortunately, when opportunities come, fraudsters tend to look, or suspected fraudsters tend to look at things that they can use to their advantage, as people are forced into very artificial working circumstances, both in work life and home life. So I'm not aware of anything in particular, and I can assure Councillor Anderson I was entirely understanding of where he was coming from, didn't take it as any besmirching whatsoever. I know he in particular, as well as all members, have been really supportive of everything the teams have done and recognised that officers have been stretched really, really thin. But I don't see anything that makes Swansea particularly unique. But again, I reiterate what I say. I'm pleased that I've got some very, very proactive officers who are on the ball and being alert to things that could happen. These are referrals, not necessarily instances of proven increased fraud activity.
Okay.
Yeah, Chair, and with your permission, just put a tail end on that. Yes, I endorse the overview that Ben gives on that. Yes, there have been incidences of fraud in a new area because obviously it's a completely new sphere for us this year. Is the figure in terms of pure fraud noticeable? No, it's not. Those matters that have come before us, either directly or via South Wales Police, have all been addressed effectively. Some further analysis of the support work, again, will probably provide some enlightening figures for the committee at the end of the year. But in relation to the fraud question, I refer to Ben's answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. If there are no more questions, I'd also like to commend the hard work that you've been doing, Jeff, you and your team. It's quite amazing how much you have covered and the successes you've had as well. And I do look forward to seeing your annual report. When is that due, Jeff?
I'll refer to Simon. I believe it traditionally comes to you late summer, early autumn, and I think that's still the plan for this year, Chair, unless Jeremy advises me otherwise.
Simon?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think the fraud plan is normally coming to committee in April, so that is on the agenda for April's committee meeting, the annual plan, which sets out the proactive work that they would like to be able to undertake in the year. The actual summary of work, or the annual report, as you like, is normally coming in September time. So September, early September, midsummer, around about that time.
Okay. If there's any opportunity to bring that forward, that would be helpful, I think, in the context of seeing what the current plan or what the intended plan is in April. But if that's not possible, then so be it. But once again, what's in the action plan in the paper is seems to be quite a lot of work. And I'm just wondering, are the timescales in that report achievable? Recognising all the pressures that we're all under currently with the COVID situation. I'm looking at some of the dates, some are April, some are June 21. May want to reflect whether those target dates are really achievable or not, because it would be a shame for you to be eager to put the dates in and fail to achieve them. I'd rather you be more realistic with the timescales in getting this work completed. Ben, do you want to come in on that one?
Yes, to be fair, if I can to the team, you're absolutely right, Chair. I mean, some of those timelines are incredibly challenging. I think the difficulty was that if I didn't try to push for them being April, it'd look a bit odd if they were sort of later in the year. But Simon and Jeff and colleagues have made clear they are very, very challenging, and you're right to make that abstraction from the report and flag that up. I still think it is right to aim for those, but some of them are incredibly challenging, given you're talking 3 weeks hence, with what the committee has already identified is a very small team that's already had to work incredibly hard all year. So I think you're right to note that, and I would echo those concerns. And I think it's easier for me to say it than it is some of my colleagues, but rest assured they have equally given those views, and rightly so.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Just for the committee members to be aware that I have shared some documentation with Simon in the hope that he could use other documents around strategies, policies, so not to reinvent the wheel really, and hope to make the journey to complete the action plan a little bit more smoother. So if there are no further questions, then perhaps we can move on to Jason Garcia. Welcome, Jason. It's been a while since we've seen you, and hope the team are keeping well.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, all well here, thank you. If I can just take you then to page, where are we? Let's find it. 147 of your pack today. You should have then in front of you our annual audit summary for 2020. This is basically a summary of all the work that we've done during this last calendar year. Probably a new style for you, and this is something we've introduced in. So, any feedback in that regard, we'd welcome. There's a lot more links in the report for other forms of information. And certainly we'd welcome your comments in that regard. Ultimately, the first sort of section shouldn't be telling you anything you don't know, just information about the council itself. And ultimately this report is not just about presenting it to the council, but to try and get our reports out to other stakeholders like the public and trying to make them a little bit more user-friendly in that regard. So the next section talks about the work that we undertake, and then I think I'd take you forward then to page 149, which just summarises some of the findings from the work that we have undertaken in 2019-20. So the bottom of that page, you've got a number of bullet points. As you know, we issued an unqualified, true and fair opinion on your council's financial statements on the 15th of September, which was in line with the statutory deadline. The quality of the draft accounts was good. We passed comment on that as part of the report we issued at that time. And that we've issued a certificate confirming the closure of the audit as of 19th-20 as well. And that last bullet point, if you've gone into, will just take you to an infographic which gives you some additional information about the 19-20 financial statements, which hopefully will be of use. So the next section then talks about our number of local and then national projects that we've undertaken in the performance area. So we've done our work on the Wellbeing of Future Generations examination, where we concluded that the council has taken appropriate steps to ensure the current service is sustainable, but has yet to develop its strategy and intended outcomes for the future provision of levels of services in Swansea. Again, links to the full report. Then some information on, as Adam said earlier, that we confirmed that the council has met its legal duties for improvement planning and reporting. We did a piece of work on financial sustainability. Again, the report is there. National Fraud Initiative, and there's some narrative from some other inspectorates. And then the last sort of section talks about the national pieces of work, which we discussed earlier around, what you've received nationally, and some of which may be relevant or not for yourselves. And then the last section of the report just talks about, from a performance point of view, the work we're going to be doing for 2021. The plan is to bring our full audit plan for 2021 to the next audit committee in April, but ultimately just some highlights here. That we're going to be looking at recovery planning in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, a COVID-19 learning project. We do our annual assurance and risk assessment work, and then following on from the work we did on financial sustainability last year, we'll also be doing another piece of work on all councils' financial sustainability. So that's all I had to say, Chair. Really, I'm more than happy to take any questions that members have.
Thank you, Jason. Do we have any questions from members, please?
Yeah, sorry, can I speak, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see part of the, it says commercialisation in local government. Is that part of the value for money programme, or is that included in it?
Okay. That would have been one of our national, pieces of work that we've done. So again, would have had maybe some local elements, but generally it would have been, not more national. If I'm just talking correctly, I think. Let me just, yes, October 2020. It was a national piece of work. So it wasn't part of our local work, councillor. But ultimately, once again, that should have gone to scrutiny committees, within the council, and anything relevant, recorded as actions, to be taken forward. But I wasn't directly, involved in the piece of work. But if there is a specific question that you need answered, I could take it away with me.
No, I was just wondering really if that is led, and perhaps Adam can actually answer that with regards to the value for money.
When it comes to the value for money conclusion, what we're basically reporting is that the arrangements themselves that the council has put in place should allow you to achieve value for money. It doesn't actually confirm that the council has achieved value for money, if that makes sense, because that would be such a significant amount of work to allow us to come to that conclusion. It wouldn't be cost effective. So we comment on the arrangements in place, and all of our work we take into account to come to that conclusion. Every year we have to do it.
Thanks.
I've got Councillor Leslie Walton's hand up.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a point, and it's slightly sensitive. On the front page, where you give details of the council, it says the Labour ruling group is 48. Well, many will realise that, very sadly, one of our members died last year. So, in fact, at the moment, it's only 47. Now, if this document is going to go to other people, I think it would only be sensitive to put a note there somehow to illustrate that. Thank you.
I'm sorry to hear about that. What I would say is that information would have come from a public source. So I would have presumed we'd have had that from, information on your website or something of that nature at a point in time, So yeah, but I do apologise that that it is inaccurate.
Okay. I've got a hand up for Julie Davis. Julie Davis.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't related to the report that you've presented, Jason, so apologies for that. But I was just wondering whether you anticipate any problems in giving an unqualified opinion for the 2021 accounts in relation to the effect of COVID on the audit work you've been able to do?
We will be issuing our audit plan, as I said, and that'll be coming to your April, audit committee. We will be setting what we call our materiality level, as we always do, based on your expenditure level that will hit your 2021, auditable accounts. Ultimately, we will identify audit risks as part of our planning. We will do work, to assess those audit risks and mitigate those audit risks. At this stage, it's too early to give any assurances over, whether we will be issuing an unqualified opinion or not. We haven't done that work. All I would say is, ultimately, you have incurred additional expenditure this year. Which has been funded, through Welsh Government. We will be doing work of that nature, but you have also acted in a number of instances, as an agent for Welsh Government, whereby you've given grants out to businesses on their behalf. Now, those actual grants won't directly go through your own financial statements other than in a disclosure note. And this is one of the key risks we will be bringing to your attention when we deliver the audit plan next month. And that is the debate as to where you act as a principal or where you act as an agent, and you only have to account for things in your accounts where you're acting as a principal. So at the moment, we're working with Welsh Government and the finance team to gain an understanding as to all the different funds flows that have come out from Welsh Government over this last year, and whether you're acting as a principal or as an agent on behalf of Welsh Government. So that will certainly form part of the work we undertake, but it's certainly far too early to make any assurances as to what audit opinion we'll be giving later in the year.
Yeah, I understand. Thanks.
Ben, do you want to come back in on that?
Yes, it's an opportunity in similar vein, albeit that question was directed to Audit Wales. The same applies to me and my staff through, talking with one of the directors at Audit Wales. We will all do our best endeavours to get through. This council closes particularly quickly. The matters that Jason has referred to quite rightly are still up for debate in terms of whether we're at principal or agent. I think we're all on the same page. But as Jason has said, you're talking very, very material sums developed at pace and washed through whatever happens. Don't forget the work my staff did on 1920 and the audit opinion work on 1920 had a sum total of 8 days worth of COVID impact on it. It was only from the 23rd of March really to the 31st of March where you had lockdown and us having to work remotely. It goes without saying that the whole of this year's audit universe, so it goes back to the points on Simon's audit opinion and audit planning for next year, all the work my officers do, all the work that Jason's team and the wider Audit Wales team do all run the risk of having unintended consequences as a result of COVID and may inhibit anyone's ability to form opinions on absolutely anything. And it's an early warning shot from me that the same question could have been asked of me and I'd have given exactly the same answer as Jason on that for obvious reasons. You're talking about the whole universe for the whole year when the accounts are viewed retrospectively, as opposed to just a handful of days last time round. And that could particularly affect some of the more esoteric arrangements, the judgments around valuations of assets, buildings and such like, where they tend to be typically large value items and that's material to the accounts, albeit not very important in one sense in isolation, because as a public body, we're not intending to sell them immediately. So it's an inevitability that all bets are potentially off, but everyone will work as hard as they can and as fast as they can to try and deliver a clean outcome. But I thought I'd take the opportunity to flag that up because I think it's appropriate and right. The question was slightly mischievous of Julie, I think, in terms of asking Jason, but asked for the right reason. And I think all the points that she's raised apply equally to this council and, of course, every other council and every other public body in England, Wales and around the world.
Thank you, Ben. Well, if there are no more questions, in summary then, I think there's some positive messages in this report, and particularly at the bottom of page 149. So you know, very positive in that light, and hopefully it will continue to remain positive. If I could ask Jason, within the planned work for 2021, you've got audit and risk assessment, and obviously Simon's got audit and governance and risk within his plan. Do you have any indication of what you will be undertaking and timing of that work? And if not, could you possibly liaise with Simon so we maximise the audit resource across what you'll be doing and what Simon will be doing to get the greatest depth and breadth?
Okay, I think it's a terminology issue here, Chair. When we're doing our audit planning work, that's when we do our risk assessment work for the audit. So it's not us looking at the risk assessment processes for the council. That is us just saying that's the audit and risk assessment process for the audit, which we utilise then to decide what audit risks we identify and what audit work of both the financial audit and the performance audit we will end up doing. So it's not that we have identified in that sense as we will be looking at the council's risk management procedures. That is just the terminology we use for our own internal audit risk assessment processes to identify then what other pieces of performance audit work we potentially need to do.
Thank you, Jason. I guess that was the case, but I just wanted to hear it for the committee's information.
No problem
as
at
well.
all. No problem.
Okay then. If there are no further questions then, thank you very much, Jason, for that report, and we look forward to seeing the plan for the following period. Okay, if we can move on to was that to approve the report?
We noted, if everybody's
Or
happy to note it, yeah.
Is everyone happy to note that report? Yeah. Okay, thank you. The next report is agenda item 10, Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021. Can I invite Tracy Meredith, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a for information report just to amend the terms of reference of the Audit Committee. Just to put members in some background context, really, there are a series of commencement orders which are being made by Welsh Government during the month of March. They will put into effect parts or chapters 1 and 3 of part 6 of the Local Government and Election Wales Act. And those parts of the Act relate to performance and governance of councils and introduce the new performance regime which the council will be subject to going forward. So in order to align the committee with those chapters 1 and 3 of part 6 of the Act, I've got a report in front of you at page 157, which shows the amendments that are being made to the terms of reference. Apologies that you don't have a tracked version. I'm not quite sure what went wrong there, but it was my intention to provide a tracked change version of the amendments. But if I just briefly go through them, because they're not huge amendments, basically you will have noted that the Audit Committee now becomes the Governance and Audit Committee. So the Governance and Audit Committee is reflected throughout the terms of reference. And then under governance, risk and control, I've added the word performance, and I've also added the paragraphs, new paragraphs B, C, D and E, which will allow you remit to review the council's draft annual self-assessment report, panel performance report, which doesn't come into effect until next year in any event, to also review any Auditor General recommendation, and also, and significantly for you, a new terms of reference to review and assess the complaint handling process within the authority. So it is a for information report, and if I can just explain why it's a for information report, because these are changes that are required under legislation, I can make those amendments myself under my delegated powers pursuant to the Constitution. They will then be reported to the next council meeting, which will be the annual council meeting in May, and that they will go to the council for information as well. Can I just highlight one or two other things? When I was looking to review the terms of reference and to add the legislative changes, it also occurred to me that you probably haven't reviewed the terms of reference for a number of years. And I think a piece of work needs to be done to perhaps bring it in line with SIPFA guidance. I looked at a number of local authorities, neighbouring authorities and other authorities, and they seem to have done that already. So I would suggest, I'll pick it up with Adam outside of this meeting, that perhaps you have another paper brought back to you updating your wider terms of reference. And also, secondly, the Local Government Elections Wales Bill, as you well know, does make provision for a third of the membership of the Governance and Audit Committee to be lay members. So what I would suggest is we also bring another report back to the Governance and Audit Committee, setting out the implications of the 1/3 lay membership. Again, that lay membership doesn't need to be in effect until next year, but you will need to reflect on the fact you will need to go through an appointment process and appoint prior to the date when it comes into force next year. So 2 pieces of work I think that you probably need to do probably within the course of the next few months, really. But I'll speak to Adam outside of the committee about that.
Thank you, Tracy. Can I ask what timeline so that we can get Jeremy to build those 2 pieces of 2 tasks really into the audit programme?
I think you can split them. I think the issue about the wider terms of reference and the SIPFA guidance, I think that can be done relatively quickly. The second issue, so I would say maybe within the course of the next 3 months, 2 to 3 months. And then the other issue about membership, I would suggest we bring that possibly 4 to 5 months.
Okay. Can Jeremy liaise with you to firm up those dates? I'm quite relaxed as to when it comes, as long as we're aware of when those papers are due.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. And also thank you for considering the SIPFA terms of reference as well, because I think they are quite comprehensive and clear in many ways. Are there any questions, please? Councillor Mike White.
Yeah, just a question, if I could, to the legal officer. With the introduction of additional lay members, is this going to be to the detriment of a reduction in members of elected members?
As things presently stand, if you keep the committees the same size as it is now, you would need 5 lay members. So it may detrimentally impact. And that's why I'm saying you need a further report back to you so you can consider all your options. My own view is that smaller committees work better than larger committees, but that is a matter for yourselves as a committee, but also for full council to decide.
Thanks, Tracy. Thank you.
Jason Garcia, hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've said this in a previous meeting, and I'd certainly echo those comments that Tracy just made. You know, our view would be that, you know, the larger committees potentially get above a certain size, you know, then it starts to be less effective, you know. So, but again, as Tracy said, it's up to you to consider what you feel is effective.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. Councillor Mike Lewis.
Yes, Chair. Question to Tracy is, whilst I appreciate what Jason has said and the option of smaller committees, would the smaller amount of members still have the same political split as we have now? Tracy, what's your view?
Sorry, political balance rules will apply to the committee, so that's why I've said that it's probably the best option is to bring a report back setting out what those options are. I've done some work already with the head of DEM services, and we've looked at potential figures and how that will impact on the committee, but my own view, it's better that we do a full report and we bring that back to the committee so you can consider all the options.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Thank you, Tracy. Are there any more questions for Tracy, please? We're asked to note this report. It's for information. Thank you, Tracy, and we look forward to receiving further updates regarding the bill. The only thing I would ask is, in light of the additional responsibilities coming in around performance and complaints, etc., is whether we need to consider any further additional training needs. I have had a conversation with the chief exec, and Ben was in on that conversation, and I think there could be opportunities for us to access training if members believe that would be worthwhile to do so, because the responsibility and the role of the Governance and Audit Committee is certainly expanding, and if any members believe it would be helpful, then perhaps you could go through Jeremy to see what the consensus is rather than taking a vote, if that's appropriate, or if members got comments on training. No. Perhaps you can go through Jeremy then to see if Jeremy can send an email out to see if there's any requirement for further training for any member. Or Councillor Leslie Walton.
Yeah, I would appreciate it if you circulated the statement you just made about training. I feel slightly caught on the hop. I'd like to know more about what you just said, because I'm afraid the clarity is still not that brilliant, but I would like it in writing, please, anyway. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. If I can ask Jeremy to send that out, and maybe Tracy, you could attach the sections where there's an increased responsibility.
Yes, happy to do that, Chair.
Okay, so you've got the full picture then, Councillor Walton, to consider before the next paper comes through. Okay, that's for information. If you can move. Oh, sorry, Adam, I almost missed you then, and Simon.
That's okay. It was just to say that as part of the report that comes back on the new Act duties, we'll make sure that there's a training element in there anyway through Audit Committee. If nothing else, it's useful to have an awareness or even a refresher of certain levels of training, perhaps with the new regulations that come in, but also some of the existing ones. Just again with the sit for guidance, it's always good to be refreshed in terms of some of the things that we did perhaps a few years ago. So we'll build that in as part of the report. That's really helpful. Thank you, Adam. And Simon?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on the lay member aspect. Obviously, this isn't an immediate issue. We've got some time to look at that. But particularly, again, in terms of training for new members, I think that's something we definitely need to consider in the longer term, because obviously we'll be appointing lay members, which might not necessarily have the knowledge and background of the organisation that our elected members or existing lay members have. It could be something, you know, this time next year we could be looking at training up new lay members completely new to the authority. So just again, something to consider in terms of training requirements.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Simon. Okay, if there are no more comments, then if we can move on to agenda item 11, revenue and capital budget monitoring Q3. Over to you, Ben.
I'll be very, very brief, Chair. It's an information item, but I do need to update with what I've verbally reported to both Cabinet and to Scrutiny Panel. So the third quarter was written at the point in time it went to Cabinet. Members will be well aware that UK ministers and Welsh Government ministers tend to stand up on a daily basis and announce new sums of money, and those invariably result in new sums of money coming to us. So it is very much a movable feast. The advice I gave to Cabinet on the 18th of February was that the position improved by at least £10 million. And I was called back to the Finance Scrutiny Panel yesterday, where I indicated that there were further announcements from the Welsh Government around monies we'd received for our third quarter loss of income claim. and our anticipated fourth quarter loss of income claim, there have also been a raft of announcements of some automatic sums of money being awarded towards year end for capacity building and recognising slowness potentially in being able to deliver all planned savings in previous years. Not specific to Swansea, just a general offer. And so the position has materially improved across the piece from that set out in the formal advice note given. I think that's the only matter I need to materially draw to members' attention so they get a better understanding, because obviously at the point of the third quarter, services and the council as a whole was anticipated still to be overspending. As a result of those announcements, it is now expected to be underspending. So that's an important takeaway in terms of the officer update. I think that's all I need to say, Chair.
Okay. And I mean, we're almost at the end of March now, and the position's still looking as you anticipated, yes?
It is. The complication with the sums being announced in arrears, as I alluded to earlier, we will be aiming to close and sign off mid to late-ish May. But the Welsh Government is not going to finalise the end of March grant offers until the second week of May, so we will be up against it in terms of tight timescales. But yes, there is nothing to indicate other than the position is materially improving, and I am also anticipating there may be further announcements still to come, both money to come to the council as we get towards year end. There could be further announcements from Welsh ministers, there could even be further announcements from UK ministers, which may have a barge consequential. And finally, there could well be further announcements and extensions to come in terms of business grants relief. I don't know, because the First Minister hasn't made his announcements yet. There are announcements later this week on considering the next 3-week lockdown period. And if there are further restrictions, there may well be further sums of money for us, again, as we've talked about earlier, to be handed most likely on an agency principal basis for support to businesses. So you can expect very substantial sums of money still to wash through, even as we get towards year end. But the position is definitely one which is materially improving by the day, hour, and sometimes it feels minute. It's a better position to be in. I know as a treasurer, I always like to see the position improving as we get through the year in what has been the most unusual of years.
Okay, thank you, Ben. It's a very comprehensive report as always. If there are no questions, then if we can move on to the two final papers for information. I don't wish to dwell on them and on these two papers unless there are any questions. The track has still got some ongoing work that we can keep an eye on to make sure that we get that information through at a future audit committee. And Jeremy and I are starting to look at the plan for the forthcoming number of months, because I understand the timetable has now been approved by the council. So we confirm that in hopefully for the next meeting. If there are no questions on those two papers, that brings us to the end of the meeting. Can I once again thank everybody for their participation and attendance at the meeting today, and stay safe, stay home, keep well.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks all.